Welcome to another home edition of the Espresso. We're getting increasingly confident that we have seen the trough of the recession in the second quarter of the year. With sentiment indicators turning around, there is more hope that the second half of the year will show a recovery. In addition to the easing of the lockdowns, more fiscal stimulus packages probably will help to get the economy back on track. While the US, Japan and Germany are able to fund these packages with reasonably cheap conditions on their own, the countries in the Euro periphery are not able to do so. Their fiscal stance was already in a very weak situation before the pandemic hit them. Plus, they have no possibility to get funding sponsored by their own central bank, as for example Japan, with also a very high public debt ratio has at the moment. In order to provide them support, we have seen already measures from the European Union coming up with some subsidized credit by the ESM and the EIB, and also the short shift working scheme SURE. But this all only helps to mitigate the downturn. It is probably not able to get a boost for the recovery. And in order to accelerate this development, we have seen an initiative from France and Germany. After many years in which the Franco-German relationship was rather cooled down, we now see that the Franco-German engine comes back into work in the midst of the crisis. And what they propose is quite far-reaching. They propose a transfer system in which the European Union will get around 500 billion in the markets and use these funds to provide it as a transfer to the countries what need them most. In that respect, the periphery countries will get support from the center without having to pay this back at a later stage. And that means they could get additional stimulus for the economy without having the burden on the deficit and debt ratios. And in that respect, it will help to get the European Union in total back into a growth mode, and it does not jeopardize the whole thing to break apart. Now, the question will be how the EU will repay these bonds they plan to issue at some stage. It could be done by contributions from the individual member countries at a future stage. The alternative to this, and more likely in our view, would be that the Commission gets the right to raise new taxes, or that we change the treaties, which would then allow the EU to operate on a permanent basis with a huge amount of outstanding debt. Now, there are still some obstacles if this program really works, as the Frugal Four, namely Austria, the Netherlands, Denmark and Sweden, are against it. We think that in the German presidency in the second half of the year, we will get through with this. So then, at that stage, we will start issuing European bonds to fund periphery expenditure. And that will have some implications on the bond markets as well. So the amount of bonds issued by the periphery countries is likely to come down, and at the same time the core business, because the EU, at least up to now, has a AAA rating as well as Germany has, this will be more competition in this segment. As a consequence, we think that the yields in the periphery are likely to come down and German yields are likely to go up. This will make the job of the ECB easier because in recent weeks they spent a huge amount of money to prevent the spreads, particularly between Italy and Germany, to widen further and to keep the financing conditions in Italy and other periphery countries at an acceptable level. So the ECB then could concentrate on buying the bonds according to their capital key rather than solely buying bonds from the periphery countries. This would make it more easier for the ECB to operate their policies in line with the request of the German Constitutional Court, which asked them to accept their own set rule in order to not get in the territory of forbidden monetary financing. One of these criteria was indeed the purchases alongside with the capital key. Now, looking forward, it remains pretty open if this move of the recovery fund will be only a one-off, and we will see that there is a pandemic expenditure funded by the whole union, or it will be the blueprint for additional measures to have a mutualized expenditure scheme, or at some stage some scheme to mutualize debt. There will be many interesting debates coming up, and I guess some heated ones as well. At the end of the day, I think we have a one-off, and we will see in the next crisis if we go further steps. With all of the measures to come, we have to have in mind that it's not just the solidarity for the periphery country that counts. We also have to keep the people out of the core countries on board that have some resistance in order to have a one-sided solidarity. In that respect, Europe is getting closer together, and we hope that it's not just a short side of solidarity, but a new system in which we find a new balance between solidarity and solid public finances. And I use now the opportunity to get one of the easing measures and to go for a beer in the reopened beer gardens.